come.
It's like myself, you know, I could be shot dead anytime. I've realised that for years, but it's meant to happen, and that's the end of it.
These are the final moments of the most notorious figure in Salford's criminal underworld, and Paul Massey calls it an off-licence to buy rum and coke, unaware that when he gets home, an armed assassin is waiting for him.
On the tranquil evening of July 26, 2015, Paul Massey, the man they called Manchester's Mr. Big, was returning home to his quiet, unassuming street in the Clifton area of Salford. For decades, he was an untouchable figure, a name whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence on the streets that raised him. He was a paradox, a community pillar to some, a crime lord to others. But on this night, his carefully constructed reign, his very aura of invincibility, was about to be shattered in a brutal storm of automatic gunfire. As Massey stepped out of his silver BMW, a figure clad in military-style fatigues seemed to materialize from the suburban shadows, brandishing a weapon that would later be identified as an Uzi submachine gun. This was no random act of street violence. It was a cold, calculated, and professional execution. This was an assassination designed to send a message, one that would rip the cover off the violent, clandestine empire he had meticulously built over a lifetime. The killer, a ghost in the twilight, unleashed a torrent of 18 rounds. 4 of them found their mark, tearing into Massey's body with devastating force. As he lay dying on the cold, paving stones of his own driveway, the untouchable Mr. Big made one last, desperate call for help. To truly understand how a man this powerful, this feared, could be gunned down with such shocking ease, we have to go back to the beginning, to the hard-bitten streets that forged him. What do you think goes through the mind of a man who knows his time is up? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't, kindly smash that subscribe button now. Hit the like and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? We want to hear from you. Now let's dive in. The rise of Mr. Big. Born in the tough, working-class neighborhood of Ordsall, Salford, in 1960, Paul Massey's life was forged in the crucible of his surroundings. The Salford of the 1980s was a city grappling with industrial decline and social unrest. Its underworld a chaotic and brutal free-for-all. Turf wars were not fought in boardrooms. They were settled on the cobbles with fists, knives, and an unflinching capacity for violence. Into this arena stepped a young and fiercely ambitious Paul Massey. He quickly made a name for himself, not just as a fighter, but as someone with a strategic mind. He associated with notorious groups like the Quality Street Gang, a criminal syndicate known for their savage enforcement and near-mythical status in Manchester's history. But Massey was never just muscle. He was a chess player in a world of checkers. He understood the intricate mechanics of power, fear, and, crucially, influence. His reputation grew exponentially, and in 1992, during a period of significant civil unrest, a local councillor named Joe Burrows publicly branded him with a nickname, Mr. Big. It was a title he reportedly detested, a label that put a target on his back, but one he could never escape. By the 1990s, Manchester's cultural landscape was exploding. The rave scene turned the city into the epicenter of a global youth movement, and with it came a goldmine for organized crime, drugs, and, just as importantly, door security. Through his rapidly expanding security firms, Massey and his associates seized control of the nightclub doors across the city, a position of almost absolute power in this new nocturnal economy. He and his firm decided who got in, who sold what, and where. This strategic chokehold inevitably brought him into close contact, and sometimes conflict, with other major players in the Northwest criminal landscape, like the infamous Noonan family. Yet, Massey carefully cultivated a unique and complex public image. He wasn't just another gangster. He presented himself as a mediator, a statesman of the underworld. He became known for brokering peace treaties and settling disputes between rival gangs across the north of England, bringing a semblance of order to the chaos, an order that often served his own interests. This dual identity was the masterstroke, the very secret to his long-lasting power. To a significant portion of his community in Salford, he was a local hero, a man you could turn to when the police couldn't or wouldn't help. To everyone else, the police included, he was one of the most feared and influential criminals in the city. A father of 5 and grandfather to 8, he somehow managed to balance a seemingly ordinary family life with a career built on extreme criminality and intimidation. What do you think is more dangerous, the crime you commit or the reputation that follows? Let us know your thoughts on the perils of a double life in the comments below. The fall and the feud. But in the world that Paul Massey inhabited, no one stays on top forever. The first significant crack in his aura of invincibility appeared in 1999, after stabbing a man in the groin and leaving him for dead outside a nightclub. Massey was sentenced to 14 years in one of Britain's toughest prisons. He served a portion of that sentence, walking out in 2007 into a world that had dramatically changed. The gangs were different, the police tactics were more sophisticated, and he was a marked man. Greater Manchester police were now watching him closer than ever, opening complex investigations into his financial activities on suspicion of money laundering. Then, in 2012, in a move that baffled law enforcement and delighted the media, Massey announced he was running for the position of elected mayor of Salford. He pitched himself as a populist champion, an anti-politician who would be the voice of the people and tackle the drug problems on streets. He ultimately finished 7th out of 10 candidates, but the audacious campaign thrust the name Paul Massey right back into the public spotlight, reminding everyone that he was still a force to be reckoned with. Behind the scenes, however, a far more dangerous and personal threat was brewing. A bitter internal war was tearing apart Salford's dominant gang, a powerful criminal organization known as the A-Team. Massey was a senior figure in this group, a respected mentor to its younger members, including its purported leader, Stephen Britton. He was caught in the middle of a schism. A splinter group, calling themselves the Anti-A-Team, had formed under a rival named Michael Kaza Carroll, and what began with whispers of betrayal and disrespect quickly exploded into a savage and deeply personal turf war. The violence that followed was sickening. This wasn't just business, it was a blood feud. The attacks were marked by a terrifying intimacy and brutality. Cars were butchered with chainsaws, rivals were publicly slashed with machetes, and in one particularly grotesque incident, enemies were beaten with coffin poles inside cemeteries. Graffiti calling Carroll a grass rat snitch appeared across Salford, urging him to come fight your war. In this environment, loyalty was everything, and betrayal was an unforgivable sin punishable by death. As the figurehead and elder statesman of the A-Team, Paul Massey was no longer just a retired gangster or a political curiosity. He was now a prime target in a war he had, in many ways, helped to create. Before we move on to the execution itself, if you're finding this deep dive into the Manchester Underworld compelling, show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. It helps us bring more of these complex cases to light. The execution. On that fateful Sunday in July 2015, the war came directly to Paul Massey's doorstep. He was returning from a trip, pulling up to his house on Manchester Road around 7:30 p.m. As he stepped out of his car, the assassin was already in position, lying in wait, dressed head to toe in combat fatigues to obscure his shape and identity. The gunman aimed his Uzi submachine gun and opened fire. The attack was a sudden, shocking eruption of violence on a quiet street. It was relentless and ruthlessly efficient. The killer fired 18 rounds in just a few seconds, turning the peaceful evening into a war zone. Massey, caught completely by surprise, was hit 4 times in the chest. The bullets pierced his heart and lungs. Mortally wounded, he instinctively scrambled for cover behind his wheelie bins, a final, desperate act of self-preservation. In his last moments, he managed to dial 999. The operator heard a desperate, fading voice say, "Hurry up, he's shot at," before the line went dead. Paul Massey, Salford's Mr. Big, collapsed and died right there on his driveway. The execution of a man once considered untouchable sent a terrifying message through the city's underworld. Nobody was safe. In the months that followed Massey's murder, The gang war spiraled completely out of control. His death sparked a horrifying wave of retaliation, with police linking it to at least 19 more shootings in Salford as the A-team and the anti-team tore each other apart. The violence even spilled over to injure innocent people, including a 7-year-old boy and his mother, who were shot in a botched revenge attack. The investigation and the Iceman. Greater Manchester Police immediately understood the gravity of the situation. This was a highly professional, targeted gangland hit, and they threw an enormous amount of resources at the investigation, quickly offering a £50,000 reward for any information leading to the killer. But they were immediately met with a formidable and familiar obstacle: the wall of silence. In an underworld governed by a strict no-grass culture, witnesses were terrified to come forward. The killers had meticulously planned the hit using encrypted PGP BlackBerry phones, making their communications nearly impossible for law enforcement to trace. The investigation was painstaking. For 3 years, it seemed to have gone cold. The breakthrough didn't come from a single dramatic tip-off, but from a painstaking combination of classic, old-school detective work and a crucial piece of luck. Police had recovered a getaway car containing a petrol can. By dedicating teams to pore over thousands of hours of CCTV footage from the days and weeks surrounding the murder, they slowly, painstakingly, began to piece together the assassin's movements before and after the crime. The investigation took a sharp and dramatic turn 3 years later, following another brutal and chillingly familiar murder. In May 2018, Paul Massey's close friend and trusted enforcer, John Kinsella, was executed. Kinsella, a notorious mob fixer and martial arts expert from Liverpool, was a significant underworld figure in his own right. He had once famously intervened to protect the family of Liverpool footballer Steven Gerrard from a gangster known as the Psycho. Now, while walking his dogs with his pregnant partner near a motorway junction, he was shot dead. The style was cold, professional, and brutally efficient. Kinsella was shot twice in the back, and as he lay on the ground, the killer stood over him and fired 2 more shots into his head. Police now had 2 assassinations with the same methodical, cold-blooded signature. Their focus narrowed onto one man, a low-level but ambitious criminal from the rival anti-A team, a man with a chilling nickname: Mark Fellows, the Iceman. Fellows was arrested in June 2018 as he stepped off a plane returning from a trip to Amsterdam. The evidence against him, once a trickle, now became a flood. His accomplice in the Kinsella murder, a man named Stephen Boyle who acted as a spotter, was also arrested. Facing the certainty of life in prison, Boyle eventually did the unthinkable. He broke the underworld's sacred code of silence and turned on his brother-in-arms, Mark Fellows. He claimed he had been duped into acting as a lookout for the Kinsella hit, but his testimony would become the final, decisive nail in the Iceman's coffin. The trial and the aftermath. The 7-week trial at Liverpool Crown Court, conducted under the watch of heavily armed police, painted a grim and detailed picture of the Salford gang war. The prosecution laid out how Mark Fellows was a gun for hire, a contract killer for the anti-team. He had planned both assassinations with meticulous, obsessive care, carrying out reconnaissance missions on a bicycle to learn his target's routines. A breakthrough piece of evidence was data recovered from a Garmin fitness watch found at Fellows' home, which contained GPS data showing he had previously traveled from his house to a field opposite Massey's home, conducting a dry run for the murder. For the Kinsella hit, a cyclist caught on CCTV near the murder scene was identified as Fellows, again on a trial run. In January 2019, Mark the Iceman Fellows was found guilty of the murders of both Paul Massey and John Kinsella. The judge, Mr. Justice William Davis, described the killings as executions, pure and simple, and referred to Fellows as a contract killer. Fellows was sentenced to a whole life order, one of the few dozen prisoners in the UK with such a sentence, meaning he will die in prison. As the verdict was read, Fellows merely smiled and nodded. His accomplice, Stephen Boyle, was found guilty of being a spotter in the Kinsella murder and was sentenced to life with a minimum of 33 years. But the story didn't conclude with the guilty verdicts. In a stunning turn of events in August 2025, after a relentless 10-year battle by his family, an official inquest into Paul Massey's death was finally granted. The family claims that the police and the state failed in their duty to protect him. They revealed that the final official threat to life warning he received was issued just 8 weeks before he was gunned down. However, they alleged this crucial warning was simply posted through his letterbox and that he never saw it. They firmly believe the famously security-conscious Massey would have taken immediate action to protect himself had he been properly and personally warned. The inquest is set to explore whether there were acts or omissions on the part of the state that contributed to his death. And even from behind the walls of Britain's highest security prisons, the Iceman story took another dark turn. In late 2025, while serving his whole life sentence at HMP Wakefield, known as Monster Mansion, Mark Fellows was charged with the murder of another inmate. The victim was Kyle Bevan, a man convicted of murdering his partner's 2-year-old daughter. This new charge only served to cement Mark Fellows' reputation as a cold-blooded and remorseless killer, both on the streets and behind bars. The cycle of violence in these underworld feuds is a brutal, tangled web where loyalty is fleeting and life is cheap. The story of Paul Massey and the men who killed him reveals the stark reality behind the headlines. If you want to see more deep dives into most complex and compelling criminal cases, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation. Paul Massey's life and death are a study in stark contradictions. He was a violent criminal who built an empire on fear and intimidation. Yet he was also seen by many in his native Salford as a man of the people, a local Robin Hood figure who enforced his own brand of justice. He was a mediator who brokered peace deals between warring factions, but was ultimately consumed by a war he was intrinsically linked to. His assassination wasn't just the end of one man. It marked the end of an era for Manchester's underworld. It exposed the brutal, unglamorous reality of gang life. A world where power is always temporary and reputations are ultimately written in blood. In the end, it's almost impossible to separate the man from the myth he so carefully cultivated. Was he simply a product of his environment? A man shaped by the harsh realities of post-industrial Salford? Was he, as some claimed, a necessary evil in a lawless world? Or was he, at his core, simply a crime boss whose luck finally and spectacularly ran out? His legacy, written in newspaper headlines and sealed with a burst of machine gun fire, is still being debated today on the very same streets he once ruled. Thanks for watching. Shadow Case Files. Real stories, real lessons,